We have three brains in one. Three brains that allow us to go from thinking to doing to being. Now, your thinking brain is called your neocortex. That's that walnut that sits on the outside with the folds and valleys.
Okay.
And that is the seat of your conscious awareness. Every time you learn something new, you make a new connection in your thinking brain. That's what learning is, making those connections. So you read the book on how to ride a bicycle, you read the book on how to dance the salsa, you read a book on how to build a doghouse, you read a book on success, how to be a better parent, you read a book on compassion, on forgiveness, and all of this information is stored in your thinking brain. It's theory, it's intellectual data, it's facts, it's all stored in your thinking brain. Now, when you take that information and you apply it, if you personalize it, if you demonstrate it, it means you're going to have to modify your behavior in some way. You're going to have to do something differently. If you change your behavior, or get your behaviors to match your intentions, or your actions equal to your thoughts, if you get mind and body working together, you're going to have a new experience. Now, the moment you have a new experience, you activate the second brain called the limbic brain, or the chemical brain, or the emotional brain. Now, let me explain. When you're in the midst of an experience, everything you're seeing and smelling and tasting and feeling and hearing, all of your five senses plug you into the environment. And as you're gathering all this sensory data from your external world, all that information is rushing back to your brain through five sensory pathways. The moment all that information reaches your brain, jungles of neurons begin to organize themselves into pattern to reflect the event. The moment they string into place, the limbic brain, or the emotional brain, releases a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling. So feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences. And we can remember experiences better because we can remember how they felt. So you can remember where you were on 9/11. You can tell me who you were with, the time of day it was, what you were doing. You can tell me everything about that moment because everything you were seeing and hearing and feeling, it changed your internal chemistry. It caused your brain to wake up, and you paid attention to what caused it. So, if you read the book on compassion, as an example, and you read it 3 times, and you have all this information wired in your thinking neocortex, you could run around your life and say to your friends, you know, you need to be more compassionate, and you need to forgive more, and what you're doing is you're basically espousing philosophy. But then, if you get a call from your spouse and he says, listen, we have to go to dinner with my mother, and you don't like your mother-in-law. Well, here's now where the rubber meets the road, because if you pull over on the side of the road and all of a sudden you notice those unconscious thoughts and you begin to pay attention to those impulsive behaviors and you start to notice the feelings that you're feeling, and as you pull over on the side of the road and you say, okay, let me restrain these thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. As you begin to observe those states of mind and body, you're actually turning on the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is beginning to quiet down the circuits in your brain that are connected to the old self. And if nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together, you're turning off that level of mind. Now, if you said, let me see, what did the book say? Oh, it said to see myself in her. Oh, okay, I'll try that out. Oh, it said to stay present and not hold her to the past. And as you began to sit there and think about a new way of being, you would begin to cause your brain to fire in new sequences, new patterns. And whenever you make the brain work differently, you're changing your mind. Mind is the brain in action. So as you begin to rehearse mentally a new way of being, and at the same time you take that knowledge and you put yourself into the equation, as you begin to think about a new way of being, not only are you making the brain work in new ways, but nerve cells that fire together and wire together. You're beginning to install the neurological hardware in your brain to have some circuits in place to use when you go to dinner with your mother-in-law. Let's just say now you walk into the dinner with your mother-in-law and you've cultivated a new mind because you sat on the side of the road for 45 minutes and got your mind and body working together. You began to fire and wire new circuits in your brain, and you stopped the chemicals from running to your body, and you began to think about a new way of being, and you started to think about compassion, and you walk in there and you get your behaviors to match your intentions, you get your actions equal to your thoughts, you get your mind and body working together, and you do exactly what the book says, and you're sitting in the presence of your mother-in-law, and all of a sudden you start to feel compassion. The moment you begin to feel compassion, you turn on that limbic brain. Now you're teaching your body chemically. You're instructing it chemically so that it learns what your mind has intellectually understood. Now, knowledge is for the mind, but experience is for the body. And the moment you feel compassion, now you're embodying knowledge. The word is becoming flesh. You begin to signal new genes in new ways, and you begin to change your very state of being. When you're in a state of being, it means that your mind and body are working as one. So you can't forgive your mother-in-law or show compassion one time and expect to be put on the stained glass windows in church. You have to be able to replicate it over and over again. And when you can do it over and over again, you will begin to neurochemically condition your body to memorize compassion as well as your conscious mind. So then when you do it enough times, you repeat the experience enough times, your mind and body begin to work together. You activate that third brain called the cerebellum. That's the seat of your subconscious. When you are in a state of being, your mind and body are working together. And we could say that you've memorized an internal chemical order that no person, no thing, no experience outside of you can move you from it. And when you're in that state of being, now we're mastering that information. It's becoming wisdom. And now that state of compassion is innate. It's in us. And then when we're in that state, then the environment is no longer controlling how we think and feel. Now how we think and feel is beginning to affect our environment. Let's talk about, compassion or forgiveness or success or wealth. It works the same exact way for anything.
Okay.
Learning first, then you get the thinking brain, then you perform the action, you get your behaviors to match your intentions, you embody that information, then it becomes innate. When you're in that state where it's in you, it's who you are, then you can say, I am successful, I am compassionate, I am a patient, because your mind and body are working together, and it's no longer a philosophical concept. You know that you know. Neurons, they possess the unique ability to store and communicate information between each other, and they're electrochemical. And so when you fire a thought, information is traveling electrochemically from one neuron to the next, and when it passes from one neuron to the next, it's exchanging information. Every time you learn something new, your brain does this. Learning is making new connections. Doesn't matter what you're learning, but if you're paying attention, there'll come a moment where those neurons will begin to connect. And that, when it happens, then you began to change yourself biologically. Let's just say that if you're thinking and feeling in the same cycle for years on end, we could say that those emotions are driving those neural networks in your brain that reaffirm the level of mind, that create the same chemicals, that signal the same genes, that keep you in this state of being. Now, genes are like on and off switches. They love information. The cells love information. But if you're in that same cycle over time, you keep the same genes signaled on and the other genes turned off. So if you're living by the state of resentment for 35 years, and you don't even know that those thoughts are slipping by your awareness because they're unconscious now, and you're demonstrating what resentment looks like in every area of your life, so you're acting that way and you're feeling it, then over time, you're going to keep pushing the same genetic button that's going to create the disease.
And not even know it.
So then the person says, well, I'm going to think positively. Well, first of all, you got to get in touch with all those, those subconscious or unconscious, go into the operating system of the subconscious and bring them to your awareness so that they would never slip by unconsciously by you again. So the moment a person surrenders those emotions that are signaling the same gene, well, it begins to biologically break in the brain, but then it no longer signals the same gene in the same way, and the body begins to become free from the emotional chains that keep it in the same state. When you learn information, you make those connections in your brain, up to 2,600 connections. But if you don't revisit it, they literally over hours, they begin to break apart. So you have to repeat it enough times, because repetition is what seals those circuits, because as you fire a thought, as you fire a thought, as you fire a thought, over time, as you keep doing it, this nerve cells begin to release this miracle grow, this glue, this fertilizer, that causes them to begin to stick and flourish together and make additional connections. So it takes repetition, and then you have to embody it, which means you got to get your body involved, because knowledge without experience is called philosophy. And experience without knowledge is called ignorance. So we have to actually do something with it so that we can begin to teach our body what our mind has intellectually understood. And when we have the experience, we begin to create long-term memories. Now it's no longer separate from us.